Happy Easter, guys. Hope you have a good day and a good evening. So, today's topic is basics of photography. Well, it is without doubt that when you go deep into photography, you find that you really need to think out of the box to get those real stunning images, isn't it? So, the skills will let you know, understand the physics of photography, but it's the talent that will make your pictures work like a piece of art actually. So today I present this talented Dr. Ardra Patil, who will enlighten us regarding a few basics of photography which will definitely make your pictures look far more stunning than the way you feel you are clicking it. So Dr. Ardra has completed her BDS from BVP Dental College, Pune, and Masters from RV Dental College, Bangalore in periodontics. For 8 long years, she has served BVP Dental College, Mumbai, and now she is into her private practice. And she indulges into, well, she's a real talented girl. She indulges into photography, painting, music, and traveling. Let me now first welcome Dr. Adra and then continue her further introduction. There we have her. Hi, Dr. Adra.
Hello, ma'am. Such a pleasure to be here.
Good evening, dear. Good evening, and thank you for making time to be with us, to be on Orthodontics platform. And let me continue where I had left halfway through with her introduction. It was regarding her professional photography qualifications. Now, she has acquired professional training under Mr. Vinay Parelkar. That is, I don't know, I'm just going to say the abbreviations, don't ask me the long form. That is ARPS, that's from UK, AFIAP Belgium, and FFIP India. And she has also been awarded first place in photography content for portfolio of 4 images on the theme Light in November 2012, held by Vinay Photo School. And their publication not only in periodontics, but she also has in photography vibes and the best of edition. Well, Dr. Adra, that's awesome. Great to have such talented people like you with us. And Adra, so what kind of photography are you interested in?
I'm mostly interested in nature, so I go out shooting in nature, and I do a lot of art photography and macro photography. So my interest is basically in macro photography. I really like to go shoot flowers and small things, which generally we tend to miss out. Small things that have details in them. So catching those details just gives me a lot of joy. So I love working macro.
Great. And probably what you come across to me as a very quiet child, and I think you talk through your photography.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
So should we just hop onto it and start off?
Absolutely, ma'am. So, hello, everyone.
Do you want me to start with the presentation, or you will let me know when should I start?
When I would need you to project in one of the slides.
Perfect.
Shall we begin?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. And we are all here because we enjoy art, and photography definitely is a form of art. And so let's begin. So the word photography itself is divided into 2 parts. That is photos and graphy. So photos is light, as we all know, and graphy is etching or drawing. So photography means drawing or etching or sketching with light. So basically the medium that we're working with in photography is light. And it goes without saying that if you have good light, you have good pictures. And if your light is poor, then your image quality will be compromised. So light is a very important factor when you're clicking photographs, which a lot of people do not consider. So you may have good backgrounds, you may have a good subject, but the light needs to be perfect. And having said that, let's just take a look at the different kinds of cameras that we can use. I'll begin with a point and shoot camera. It is something that was very popular maybe 10 to 15 years back. Very easy to carry around like a pocket camera, and you don't really need to have much training. Even children can use the camera. Basically, it has a lot of modes. So you go into one of the modes, say macro or indoor, outdoor photography, sports, any one of those, and then all you have to do is click, because once you select a mode, the camera is going to do all the adjustments for you, and you do not have too much of control over the settings, especially the exposure parameters. So basically, it's a very easy to use camera, very user friendly. On the other side of the spectrum, you would have your DSLR, which most professional photographers use. The advantage with the DSLR is that it's going to give you a lot of control over the exposure parameters. When I say exposure parameters, I'm speaking about the aperture of the lens, the shutter speed, and the ISO, which we will be discussing in a bit. I will come to those. So you can customize those to get the kind of image that you have in mind. So you can very well create an image first in your mind, and especially if you're doing art photography and you intend on arranging things and clicking, you can get a picture exactly the way you have envisioned it. So basically, a lot of exposure parameters there which you can control. Another advantage of the DSLR is that you can change the lenses. So you can work with various focal lengths. So the DSLR gives you the option to change a lens and use another one if you want to use a different focal length. Now, so basically it allows you a lot of control over almost all the parameters that are required to shoot a picture. And between these two cameras, you have something in between, which you would say is a bridge camera. It is called a bridge camera because it is a bridge between the two. It's also called a prosumer because part of its qualities are between the professional DSLR, so that's where the pro comes from, and zoomer from consumer. So your point and shoot is the consumer camera. So this bridge camera is also known as the prosumer. And as the DSLR goes, you would have control over the exposure parameters even in a bridge camera. The disadvantage you would say is you will not be able to change lenses. Now the DSLR would have a lens which can zoom in and zoom out. So it gives you a good optical zoom. But the thing is, in the given range, suppose it's giving you a range of focal lengths and you want to shoot at a focal length which is either beyond or below the given range. In that case, you will not be able to do so with a bridge camera, and that is where the DSLR would be handy. So a DSLR gives you complete control over what you want to shoot, at what focal lengths you want to shoot it. And having spoken about these three, we cannot forget the mobile. A lot of people are doing mobile photography these days, and they're clicking awesome pictures. They come up with really beautiful pictures. So every camera has its advantages. And I think we just need to pick up what we are comfortable with, and each of them can make wonderful pictures. So, so those were the kinds
when I talk about this camera, the only when we were young, the hot shot camera was there. That was really hot during our time, and it was sleek, slender, very easy to carry, and you could just put it in the purse and carry it also. Though you had to go and get it developed and all. How photography has developed over a period of time.
The years, yes, true. Right.
So now, what is the next part of it?
Yeah, I would like to discuss a bit about the lenses and the focal lengths that we can use. So basically, lenses come in two types. Broadly, you can have a blocked lens or a prime lens, which has a fixed focal length. The other kind of lens is your zoom lens. As I mentioned earlier, it will offer you a number of focal lengths because you can zoom in and zoom out. Now, when I say focal length, the focal length is nothing but the distance from the lens to the sensor of your camera. So obviously, if you're using a zoom lens, when the lens zooms in or zooms out, the distance from the lens to the sensor is going to change, and that is why you have different focal lengths. Which is a good thing when you're traveling. You can carry just one or two lenses, which are zoom lenses, and you can work at various focal lengths. Though it gets a little bulky, because a zoom lens will have many glass elements and lenses in it. So it does get a little bulky to carry. Versus your block lens, a block lens will work at only a given focal length, but it is designed to do its job best at that focal length. So the picture quality is always better with a block lens, as it does not have too many glass elements in it, and it's designed to do what it's designed to do. So basically, you can say a block lens is a master, and the zoom lens is a jack of all trades. So you need to choose which you want to use depending on what outcome you're looking at. So those are the two basic kinds of lenses. And again, depending on what
Can
you
I can
want
I
to
interrupt? Can I interrupt? Because just for the clarity, since we are talking about the basics, just for the clarity, when you talk about zoom lenses, are those the ones which are like long lenses and you keep take it?
yes, you can have, depending on what focal length you're using at and what is the range. Say you have a lens which is giving you a bigger range, then they will come out long. So yes, you can have long, especially telephoto lenses. They look really long, so they allow you to see very far. That was exactly what I was coming at, actually.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah. So basically, your lenses. Let's say you want to shoot something which is widespread, say a mountain range, and you need a lens that's going to give you a wide angle view. So you need a wide angle lens, basically. So those are typically in the focal length range of 12 millimeters or 18 millimeters. That is basically your wide angle lens. So it will allow you to shoot really wide, as against a telephoto lens, which I just spoke about some while back. A telephoto lens will allow you to shoot an object that is really far off. It brings the object closer without you physically having to go closer to the object. So basically, it will give you a lot of zoom in. So those are typically in the focal length range of say 250, 300 mm, or 400, 500, 600. That's the focal length I'm speaking about. And the question that you just asked, suppose it's a lens that is giving me it's allowing me to zoom from 300 to 600 maybe, then the zoom, you will see the lens zooming out. So you see those long lenses, So
If I have to shoot a hibiscus flower, okay,
uh-huh.
I'm shooting it at a very close range, right? I mean, I'm close to that flower. So what
Right.
should be my how should I go about it then?
Yes, so you would not use a telephoto lens for that, because as the name suggests, it is used to click something that is really far off. But one thing I would like to mention here is that it is not a wide angle lens, so it will decrease the angle at which you shoot. You can shoot far off, but at a narrower angle. So it's typically used in wildlife photography, where you want to shoot something that's really far off. You can't go very close to an object, or maybe bird photography. But as you said, maybe when you're trying to shoot flowers, then the telephoto lens is not the right lens to use. Then the next lens that we're going to talk about is your macro lens. So basically, I have a macro lens here. This is the 100 mm macro. So this is how it looks. Very beautiful lens to
Company?
use. Very beautiful. This
Which
is the
brand
Canon.
of
Canon.
So,
Canon 100 mm.
okay.
So yeah. So basically, I use this a lot. And when you want to shoot something close up, as you said, I want to shoot a flower, or maybe you're trying to do product photography, you're trying to shoot jewelry and trying to get the details, really magnified. When you want something magnified, something that's close by, but you still want to magnify and bring the details out, then the macro lens is really a wonderful lens to use. So that is something like 50 mm, 60 mm, 100 mm focal length. So that was the third kind of lens, macro. So especially if you want to shoot something that's close by, then you would be, and you want to bring out the details and softness of color, especially when we speak about flowers, then the macro lens is the right lens to use. And having said that, now I think we should, or we can move on to the most interesting part of this discussion, which would be the exposure parameters, because that is what brings out the magic in photography, because it's all in your hands. You can customize the image the way you want to when you play with light. And that's exactly what we can discuss now. So the first exposure parameter that we would want to look at is the aperture of the lens. So basically, the aperture is like the pupil of your eye. Ma'am, can I have the slide, please? So we'll be able to show.
Yes, yes. Give me a moment.
Sure.
You let us go to the next slide, right?
Yeah.
Let me know. Next one,
Yeah,
right?
this one. Right, right. So your
I'll just make it full screen.
Right. So the lens aperture is like the pupil of the eye. So just as the pupil of our eye becomes big or small, to let in more or less light into the retina, similarly, the aperture can be wide or narrow. So we have control over that. If you can see, there are blades there which close in to create a smaller aperture. So it will control the amount of light which is going into the sensor. Now, basically, the sensor of the camera is equivalent to the retina of the human eye. So basically, the light has to fall on the sensor for it to create an image. Can we have the next slide, please?
Sure. Give me a moment.
Absolutely. So as we can see here, in the first picture to the left, we can see that the aperture is really wide. And in the picture adjacent to it, the aperture has become smaller. The blades have closed in. And so because you have a small aperture, there's going to be less light going to the sensor. Now, basically, these aperture widths are denoted by a number, which is called the f number or the f-stop. Actually, it's called focal ratio, which is nothing but the ratio of your focal length to the width of the aperture that you're using. But let's keep the mathematics aside. We really don't need that. So how the f number works is, it is inversely proportional to the diameter of the aperture. So if you have a smaller f number, say 2.8 or 4, as we can see here, then your aperture is wide. As the f number increases, you can see on the image to your right, that is f16, the number has increased, but the apertures become small. And we can see this better in the...
Exactly like our needles and our suture material like this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we can demonstrate this better in the next slide. You have a whole range of apertures there. So
I'll go to the next slide. Yeah.
Yes. So we can see the different widths of the apertures there. So you have f2.8 to your left, which is a small number, but a large aperture. The width of the aperture is large. Then as you go mid slide, you can see the f number is increased to 5.6. The number has increased and the aperture has become slightly smaller. So you have little lesser light going to the sensor. As you go to the extreme right, you can see the f number has really increased. So you have f16 there, or you have higher f numbers, f22, So basically, as the f number increases, your aperture is going to become really small. And that is when you have really less light going to your sensor. And how that affects your image is that the brightness of the image or the exposure of the image is going to change. And we can now I can explain that in the next slide, please.
Okay.
Yes, so this is a good example to see how the aperture width is going to have an impact on the exposure or the brightness of our picture. So if you can see, the topmost aperture used there is 2.8. So that's a really wide aperture, lot of light going inside, and that is why you can see the image is really bright and nice. As you go higher, you increase the number to 5.6, the aperture is becoming small. So there is lesser light entering into the camera and going to the sensor. So you can see the image is not really dark, but it is not as bright as the image on the top. And depending on how you want the effect in your photograph to be, you can decide on either of the widths of the apertures. As you go further high up, you increase the aperture number to f11 here. You can see that the image has become really dark because the aperture is really narrow now, and there is insufficient light to bring about a well-exposed image. So you can see how the aperture has an impact on the exposure and the brightness and the final outcome of your image. So that is very much in your hands. So you can change the aperture
What are
to
the clinical, sorry, I'm interrupting you because I myself am looking at what are the clinical implications of this? Like when do you use the wider aperture? When do you use a smaller aperture?
Okay. The aperture also has an effect on the depth of the field. So basically, why I'm bringing this up is because the depth of field is, you don't want too much depth of field, or you don't want to play around too much with depth of field when you're shooting intraoral, basically, clinically. So basically, other than the fact that the aperture affects the exposure or the brightness of the image, it is something that will also affect your depth of field. Now, I'll just take a minute to explain what depth of field means. Now, depth of field is the amount of the picture that you want in focus. I'll go back to the old example again, where we are standing outside, you have a mountain range in front of you. And between me and the mountain range, say, which is a kilometer away, I have between these two, you have a tree. Now, in the first instance, I want the entire view to be in focus. So I want the tree, the mountain range, everything to be in focus. So I need the depth of field to be really large. So everything is in focus. And suppose I decide in my next click, I want to keep only the tree in focus. So everything in the background and the foreground is blurred out. So I can keep the focus only on the tree. So to do that, obviously I have to reduce the depth of field. I have to make it shallow. So that can be done with the aperture. Now the fun part here is that here it is reverse. The aperture number is directly proportional to the depth of field as against the width. Earlier we saw the aperture numbers inversely proportional to the width. So smaller the number, bigger the width of the aperture. But when you're speaking about depth of field, smaller the f number, smaller the depth of field. So if I want a smaller area in focus, I'm going to keep the f number smaller. So which is again very typically what people working with macro do. You want a very shallow amount of the picture to be in focus and the background blurred. So that gives really soft images. So, so basically when you're working macro, you would want to use a shallow depth of field. But when you're speaking about clinical photography, you do not want something to be blurred out. Basically, if you're trying to shoot teeth or some condition and you want the entire thing to be in focus, because you're not really trying to create an artistic image, right? So you can use contrast. Yeah.
A realistic image.
Sorry, ma'am, I lost you.
I think we need a realistic image.
Yes, absolutely. So you do use contrasts in the background to blur out, suppose you have other anatomical structures you don't want. But I guess it's not very art. As in, like, you don't want to create art. You want to shoot things as they are, very realistic, as you said. So the depth of field may not be too important when you're trying to shoot intraoral photographs. But yes, when you're trying to shoot art photography, when you're trying to do macro, especially, the depth of field is going to be very, very, it's going to be a very important factor. And this is where I would like to have the last slide, please, ma'am. So that will really bring out the effect of depth of field. The slide after this. Right. So this is a good slide to explain how depth of field works. So to the left, if you can see, it's an image where the flower is in focus and the background and the foreground has really been blurred out. And that is because it's a shallow depth of field. I'm using a smaller f number here, f4. If you see the image to your right, what is happening is that along with the flower, you have the background and the foreground, a lot of things in focus. So it's really diverting your attention. Where do I look? Do I look in the background? There is some water there. There are some leaves. In the foreground, again, leaves. So, the depth of field is quite large, as is the aperture number. So you can see the higher aperture number has created a larger depth of field, and it's kind of little disturbing to look at this image because you don't know where exactly you need to focus. So the image to the left, as we all might agree, is a more aesthetic image. So it allows you to focus. The photographer can exactly direct the viewer to focus on an object that he or she intends on the person to focus on. So basically, it clears out all, it washes out the background, and it just brings the flower in focus, and it looks beautiful there. So that is how you can work with the depth of field and decide how much of your field you want in focus. So that is another important function of the aperture. So the aperture is a very, very important exposure parameter, and you can control the exposure, brightness, and the depth of field with the aperture. So,
That
with
is
the aperture,
amazing. So, yes,
yes.
Pallavi, that's what I said. Dr. Pallavi Vaidya joined us. She's a radiologist. So, she's she's complimenting you that it is amazingly explained.
Oh, thank you so much.
So,
Thank you, ma'am.
here I have one small question for you, Ardra. That most of the surgeons we not most, many people do a good job over there, but in the OT when we are clicking pictures, mostly we are doing it with mobile only, of course, but some people do it with DSLR cameras also. So we should have the OT light on or not, or we should take it with the flash.
If you are using a flash, you should not have the OT light on, because these two lights are going to create disturbance there, because the quality of light, the OT lights are really strong. You don't need the flash there. And if you use light coming from two different directions, it could be used to cancel out the shadows. But again, depending on what is the kind of light and how intense the light is. Otherwise, you would have a mixture of two lights. And if one of the lights is sufficient and is not creating shadows, then you need not use. So you can either switch off the OT lights, or if they are good enough, then you may want to not use your flash. So typically, the chair light or the I haven't worked so much with OT lights, but the thing is, when doing dental photography, we prefer to remove the chair light and work with the flash. Right.
And so, what is the next session waiting for it?
We'll discuss about the next parameter, exposure parameter, which is shutter speed, which is equally interesting. So
I think I have maybe some issue with her network. I'll just ask her to join back. So, thank you, Arpita. Yes, Sujit, thank you. We are not yet done. She has lots of many interesting things to tell. Let me just ask her to join back. Yeah, Pallavi, let me get Ardra back, and I'll just ask her to join back quickly. I don't know what is wrong with her network, probably. Give me 2 minutes. Till then, if you all have any other questions also, you can post regarding aperture or regarding the shutter speed, anything that you all have in mind. Yeah, there she comes back. I'm so sorry for that little interruption. Yeah, hi Ardra.
ma'am, can you see me?
I can hear you. I can't see you. So there we have lost her again. But stay tuned, guys. I'm sure she'll be here with more information. So till then, it was a real interesting session. Lens for intraoral photography. Yeah, match. That's a very good question, Siddharth. Let her come back, then I will definitely ask her. So, some issue regarding her network, I guess.
Yeah, I think that.
No issue. So till then, we have quite a few questions for
Yes.
you. Pallavi, Dr. Pallavi is asking, she wants to purchase a DSLR, so which one would you recommend?
Oh, there are a variety. I wouldn't really suggest a company. Ma'am, the thing is, I think there's some problem with the heating. For some reason, the app is saying it's going to shut down.
My
Can I? Yeah, just a minute, please. Can I just try switching to another phone?
So
Just
till
a
then,
minute.
let this be, okay. Yeah. So till then, you all want me to show the slides? Sure, give me a moment. The previous ones also, the aperture slide, let me show you right from the beginning. Yeah, so the size of the aperture, as she said, and the focus, I mean the aperture size, the bigger is the aperture size, more light is coming inside just like the pupils of our eye, and brighter is the picture. And as she explained that if the aperture size is more, then only the picture which you want to focus on is into focus and the other things are softened, whereas if the aperture is small, the entire picture comes into focus. Stay tuned, guys. She's getting back with another mobile, I guess. So I don't know what happened, but that's now. Anyone else has any other question? I'm also going to ask her a question regarding how to click pictures for. Yeah. We have you.
Yeah, sorry for the
Welcome back.
Yeah, so
Thanks,
sorry for the
guys, for hanging on. Yeah. Yeah. So another question. Are you answering Dr. Pallavi's question about which camera to purchase?
About which camera you can purchase. There are many available in the market. You have Sony, you have Nikon, you have Canon. So I have basically worked with Canon mostly. I had a bridge camera, which is, I actually have it here, which was also Canon. So I have only worked with Canon. So I cannot comment on the other brands that you have. I'm pretty happy with Canon. So that's a good brand to have. Nikon is good as well. Sony offers you some good cameras. So you would want to check the what are the features that the camera is offering and what really do you want to click, So you can check out, there are various features, various cameras in all companies. So that's something that you would want to, there's a wide range to choose from basically.
Dr. Varsha Rathod is also watching. Thank you, Varsha, for being around.
Hello, ma'am.
So one more question we had from Dr. Siddharth Haritwalinga, prosthodontist. He's asking lens for intraoral photography, especially for shade matching. He's a prosthodontist, so shade matching comes into picture.
I think macro would be a good lens to use. You would want to use a ring flash for even distribution of light. I think macro would do the job very well.
Okay. So Dr. Varsha Rathod is appreciating your presentation. Even I guess I'm having an interaction with her after years, maybe 20 years now. Yeah. So next, what are we in the heading on to? The next thing you said, shutter speed.
Shutter speed, yes, absolutely. That's your second exposure parameter. So the shutter speed is the time taken by the shutter to open and close. So when you press the click button, that is what happens. The shutter opens and closes, and then the light is let inside to the sensor. So basically, you can have a quick shutter speed or you can have a slow shutter speed. So it goes without saying that your shutter speed is really quick. Because the shutter is closing really fast, there is less light that's going to go in. So your image will be slightly darker versus a longer shutter speed, which is anything in the range of 1 second, 2 seconds, 15 seconds. Whereas your quick shutter speeds can be something like, I'd like to demonstrate here. I have my camera here. So I'm keeping the settings on time value, so that allows me to adjust the shutter speed. I hope you can hear this. This is 1 by 2/50th of a second. So it's really quick. 2/50th part of a second. So it's, so I hope you could hear that. So that's really quick. That's really quick. So it will let less light in. But the advantage of this is that you can capture something in a very crisp form. So there is no blur. Again, coming to outdoor photography, when you're shooting in ambient light, which is sufficient, so you have a lot of light outside, so quick shutter speed should not really bother you, because you already have a lot of light, and the light let in during that short period of time is also going to be sufficient to expose your image well. And when I say crisp image, say you have a child jumping and you want to have the image midway when the child, he or she, is in the air. So you don't want the child's feet to be on the ground. You want to have it sharp, and very crisp. So you don't want blur. So that's the time you would want to use a very quick shutter speed. So to just capture the moment. So that is how you can use the shutter speed to your advantage. Versus a longer shutter speed when you want to actually capture motion or a blur. When you want an intentional blur in the form of motion, say a car is moving, or maybe there are trail lights. You can see those, you must have seen those pictures where you have red lights, red light trails, long trails, night photography. That is because the shutter speed is very long. So basically 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So whatever motion is occurring during those 10 or 15 seconds, it is captured by the camera. So one thing that you need to be careful about when you're using longer shutter speeds is your hand cannot be steady for that long. And whatever shake or movement occurs in your hand is going to be recorded by the camera. So when using longer shutter speeds, it kind of becomes mandatory for you to use some stabilizing device like a tripod. So basically, this is a good option to use when you're doing night photography, because you want more light to come in, and so you can keep the shutter open for longer. So enough light coming in, that will create enough exposure, and you can do it with a tripod, and you can have those trails and those beautiful images. Sometimes you must have seen night photography where you have star trails, So yeah, so all those are done using slower shutter speeds. And that is again something I would like to demonstrate here. Just a minute. What we heard some time back was 1 by 2/50th of a second, which is quite quick. And say I will just demonstrate to you a 2-second shutter speed. So this is the shutter is going to be open for 2 seconds. So it goes off really slowly. And this was just 2 seconds. You can have it open for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, even half a minute, when you're trying to shoot something where you want to have a trail of lights, or maybe you want to capture motion. So
maybe a butterfly flying.
Yes, or a bird landing, where you want to show the blur in the movement, the movement of the wings. You want to catch that, or probably even waves, sea waves. You want to show the, you don't want a crisp image, but you want to show the flow of water, a streamlet maybe of water, where you want to show the blurriness, the softness. You can keep your shutter open for a longer period of time. So, so other than the fact that the shutter speed controls the amount of light going in to the sensor, it will also control the kind of image that you want to create. So that is, again, as I said, the exposure parameters. You can work with them to really create a very customized image. Whatever endpoint you wish, you can achieve using and tweaking the exposure parameters. So your aperture and shutter speed are very important. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sachin Thakur is asking you, can you show the open shutter if you take the lens cap off? So
Okay.
it will be
Okay.
easier for
I,
people to understand probably.
I am not sure it would be seen. I think there's a lot of reflection
I
there.
can see
So
both of
I'm
us.
not able to see the shutter. Probably the aperture width, but shutter you can appreciate it with hearing. That is
Yes,
why I wanted to.
definitely.
You won't really be able to see. Yeah, yeah, and especially I think there's a lot of reflection here. But I do hope I've been able to convey how that works.
Definitely, it's very clear for someone no voice like me in photography. It was pretty clear because normally I am not much into photography. Whatever, like with a mobile only we do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the third parameter that we should take care of?
ISO, I think this is something that dentists are very familiar with in radiology. So ISO in your camera is something that has to do with the sensitivity of your sensor to light. So why it is important in exposure is generally a good ISO to use is between 100 and 200 when you have sufficient light. But say you're shooting and the light is going down, say later in the evening, and you're finding that your images are getting darker. Then what you want to do is you've tried playing around with the aperture and the shutter speed, but as I said, you can't do much if the light is not right. So the light itself is really low, and somehow you want to get that moment. Probably a good time to shoot would be to come again next day. But suppose you're there just for a day, you have to click that image. Then you can try increasing the ISO. So you're basically increasing the sensitivity of your sensor to light. So basically, even though the light is less, because you're increasing the sensitivity, you will get more exposure. Now, you can increase the aperture to 400, 800, 1600, some cameras 3200, 6400, But one danger to this is when you're increasing the sensitivity of your sensor, you're also increasing its sensitivity to frequencies of light, which you do not want. So basically, along with what you are trying to capture, you will also capture frequencies which are unwanted. So that is why you get grainy images, or what you call in photographic terms noise. So there's a lot of noise in the image when you try to do that. So basically, as far as possible, I would limit myself to say maybe 800 ISO if I have to increase. But sometimes you just can't help it. You have to live with it, So you increase the ISO further, and you might have to compromise the image quality somehow. Or if possible, you can bring in external sources of light and somehow try to create good light. So ISO, basically, what I was trying to say is it would increase the sensitivity of the sensor to the ambient light. So that is how it can be used to control exposure.
When you
So
talk about getting external light, what do you mean by that? Uh, some
again,
special
yes.
lights?
Special lights, yes, if you're equipped to do that. And again, depending on the object that you're shooting. If it's a smaller object, we had one time when we were on a picnic and it was getting dark and we wanted to shoot something small, like a shell, at a beach. It was a very pretty little shell. And what everyone did was they put on their mobile lights. So the thing is, we had enough light there. But again, you have to know that mobile light is or external lights are very different from natural light. So you will never get the softness that you need in some pictures. For example, try shooting a flower outside with mobile light and try shooting it in daylight. It's going to be the world of a difference. It makes a world of a difference on what kind of light you're using. Which brings me to another point. If you're trying to shoot macro, and if you're trying to shoot softer objects and softer pastel colors, then it's a good idea to use to shoot in light early in the morning or early in the evening. Because if you try to shoot in the afternoon, you may say the light is just sufficient and bright enough. But if you're trying to shoot softer objects, the light is too harsh, and then you're going to create a lot of shadows in your image. So there's a lot of contrast and shadows, and that takes down the aesthetics. I keep coming back to aesthetics because we are here for the art. So speaking of, making an image more aesthetic, you would want, definitely you want some highlights, but you don't want too contrasty images and afternoon light is not a good light to shoot even portraits or soft objects. So you want the light to be soft. Even portraits, when you're shooting portraits, you need to be careful that the face, say, is evenly lit. So if you have the source of light only from one direction, you can think of using a reflector on the other side. So the reflector reflects the light to the dark side of the face and you have an evenly lit face. But again, I would say that reflectors are again going to, the light again needs to be kind of soft. You can't have too harsh a light when you're trying to shoot portraits. You want the catch light in the eyes, or you want the soft shades to be visible. So then you would want to use diffusers. You have soft boxes. These are devices which have a translucent coating to it. So what it does is it absorbs some of the light, so the light is not too harsh. So if you're trying to use flash, using a diffuser is a good idea, because the flashlight is very harsh and prominent. So the diffuser diffuses the light, spreads it out evenly, and you get soft pictures, basically soft light on the faces. And that's a good idea to use when you're trying to click portraits.
That's an awesome trick and tip and whatever I can say, knowledge that you have imparted. Because many people, like I've seen, and they focus their cameras in the direction, like in the direction of the sun. So the images, you kind of see only the silhouettes then.
Silhouettes, yes, yes. But I think even when you're trying to shoot silhouettes, you need not directly focus at the sun. You wait for the sun to go a little down. So the problem with facing the sun is, first of all, not good for your eyes, and secondly, you may try doing that if you have some filters on your lens. You have something like UV filters which you should put on all your lenses. So UV filter is a good way of protecting your lens from dust and dirt and also UV light. And more than the lens getting spoiled or the image quality being spoiled, as in for shooting silhouettes, you would obviously have to shoot against light. You would have to shoot against light, otherwise you wouldn't get a silhouette. But shooting at the sun directly, it will I think it could affect your sensor. It could damage the sensor of the camera. And this especially happens in point and shoot, where you don't have too much of control over the shutter speed. It's a pre-set value, and the shutter is going to remain open because it cannot really judge that you're focusing at the sun. But a DSLR is smart enough, and if you have maybe if you are working on aperture setting, then the camera is smart enough to use a quicker shutter speed and maybe close the shutter faster, so that the sensor is not damaged too much. So yes, of course, shooting against light it can create very beautiful images, silhouettes, but you shouldn't focus really at the sun directly, especially if it's a little too high.
Thanks for that information, Dr. Adra. And I also want to ask you one thing, that that there are like some lenses which are called as fast lenses or slow lenses, something like that. What are they?
Yeah, basically a lens will, if you look at your lenses, it will specify the widest aperture at which you can work. So say the widest aperture that you can work in one lens is 2.8, and in another lens it is 5.6. Now, if you're working with a lens which is giving you the widest aperture control of 2.8, now because it's a wide aperture, you have enough exposure, because you have a lot of light coming in. And because you already have sufficient light, the lens shutter can go up rather quickly, really fast. And that is why it is called a fast lens. So basically a fast lens will allow you to shoot really quick, so you're not forced to keep your shutter speed really long, or you don't have to keep your shutter open for long just for the sake of exposure. If you want an image that requires you to have a quick shutter speed, then you need to choose one that has a widest aperture possible. So working with a lens that gives you an aperture of say 2.2 or 2.8 will be a lens with such a wide aperture will be called a fast lens, because it allows the shutter speed to go up rather fast. So if you are routinely into clicking pictures where you need the shutter speed to be fast, then you want to choose a lens which is fast, which gives you widest possible aperture use. So that's what a fast lens would be.
That's right. And I guess I'm only asking you all the questions. So the white umbrella that this studio use during photography, are those the
Right.
diffusers?
Yes, like I just said some time back, they would act like diffusers because they diffuse the light evenly, you know. So again, a good idea to use when you're using a flash or you have a unidirectional strong source of light, and suppose you want the light to be spread out evenly, then yes, an umbrella is a good substitute for a softbox. Uh, a softbox would have, like I said, would have a coating which absorbs some of the light, and so it's not too harsh. An umbrella may not really absorb light, but it definitely will evenly distribute it and act as a diffuser. So yes, that is what a white umbrella would do.
And I have also heard about something called an uh, full frame camera. What's that?
Yes, yes, a full frame camera and APS-C. So that is, which also brings me back to ma'am's question: what camera should I choose? And I said, depending on what you really want to work on, you know. So full frame camera is called so because the sensor size is a full size. Now, basically, if you go to the cameras where you used to use your films, you know, so the traditional film which was used was 36 mm by 24 mm, which we call as a 35 mm film, you know, those Kodak films. So a camera which uses the same size of sensor in digital photography, a digital sensor which is the same size of that film, 35 mm, would be called a full frame camera. As against an APS-C, an APS-C camera would be a crop sensor in which the sensor is slightly smaller. So when you're taking an image, the entire image cannot fit on the sensor because it is small. So what the camera does is it crops off the edges of your picture so that the picture can fit on the small sensor. So you would wonder, why would someone want to do that? You know, why would someone choose to buy an APS-C camera? But the thing is, with the cropping, another thing that happens is it gives you a zoom factor. We have all noticed that when we crop images, we automatically find that the picture is zoomed in. You know, it becomes bigger. So you get a zoom factor, which you can call a crop factor. And a crop factor is something like in Canon it is 1.6. In general you can say 1.5 1.5 crop factor. So basically what a crop factor does is, suppose I am shooting with a lens which is 50 mm focal length on an APS-C camera. So the camera will lend it a crop factor and give me a multiplication factor of 1.5. So my 50 mm lens is going to now work like say 50 into 1.5 would be 75. So a 50 mm lens would work as though it is a 75 mm lens. So you're actually getting more focal length. So this is a good idea for people who want to work with longer focal lengths. So say if you're trying to do wildlife and you want to increase your focal length, then perfect, you know. So those people would prefer to buy an APS-C camera, you know, versus those who would say, no, I do not want any crop factor. I want my images to be just the way they are. Then a full frame is a good choice for you, you know. So again, it's not like this camera is better, that camera is better, you know. Both cameras with both kinds of sensors have their pros and cons. So that is why, you know, it's very difficult to choose what camera you want to buy, you know, because it exactly depends on what you want to do with the camera, what kind of photography you want to do, you know. So taking all those factors into consideration, you can choose the camera. And so that's how a full frame camera
So
works.
based on that, if I ask you that, okay, I want it like, say for just wildlife photography, like people keep going to Bandhavgarh and other places to do the, fulfill their passion of photography. So what kind of camera do you need for that?
Um, Personally, I would be happy to use a camera with an APS-C sensor. So crop frame would give me a zoom factor, and you can work with different lenses. You would definitely be using telephoto lenses if you're doing wildlife photography, and a telephoto, either a block lens or a zoom lens. A zoom telephoto will give you a wide range. I say maybe I want to work with 300 mm, or I want to work with 400 mm. You can use a zoom lens, and the block lenses are very costly as well. So a zoom lens with an APS-C sensor would give you a good result, I guess. So
Okay. And hi, Levlin. He's asking, I guess a full frame camera are good for big posters too.
big posters.
Yeah.
Did I get it right? Um, uh, not necessarily, because with a DSLR, you get sharp images and your images won't pixelate. So, yes, when I say an image is cropped, the image that you get in an APS-C is not going to be blurred out, or it's not going to pixelate if it is short, right? So, it's not that an APS-C camera will not allow you to print poster size. It will, it definitely will. But it will not give you a crop factor, and you get good poster size images with both the cameras. So as far as I know, this is something even I would like to read up about. But yes, as far as I can imagine, both would be good enough. If shot with good exposure and they don't pixelate, you can use either to create poster size images.
Great. And Dr. Siddharth is asking again for dental microscope video procedure or video of procedure, which camera we should use?
For dental videography.
Microscope, dental microscope video of procedure. Why microscope?
Dental microscope.
Siddharth, can you be little? Maybe. Did you mean intraoral, Siddharth?
Intraoral cameras will be totally different. Yeah.
Which would we use for intraoral? Like if you want to say, I want to record a third molar surgery, which camera would be good?
I wouldn't really be aware of the brands in this, but definitely third molar.
I went from the aspect of the technical.
Intraoral cameras itself would be different, and you would allow the lens to go inside to the area that you want to shoot. So you don't have to be worried about getting proper access to a third molar area, or maybe a maxillary molar. So you can use mirrors, of course, and intraoral works totally differently. So the lens would be very close to the object as it goes right inside the mouth, so you don't have to limit yourself to outside the mouth. So because the lens is going inside, it can go right close to the object. It's like surgeries, it's like laparoscopy when you're doing, and you have the camera right inside the system, so similarly with intraoral cameras, I guess.
Yeah, so Siddharth is asking for recording procedures under dental microscope. So he probably meant for root canals, what we are using. Do you mean that? Dental microscope? For recording procedures under dental microscope.
Okay. No, and I really would have to find out about that. Not too well versed with that.
Fine. We'll get back to you with that, Siddharth, personally.
Sure, I would like to read up about that too. So,
yeah. So that adds on to our knowledge too.
Yes, right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, do we have any other inputs from you, Ardra, regarding the photography?
I guess we've covered the basics, the science of it, and at least the basic parts, which would, a lot of people don't want to use the DSLR. So I think with these, with what we discussed and a little bit of knowledge of how the settings can be used, I think that covers the basics, and I think we should go ahead and click. We get more conversant as we go on clicking. So I guess that's it.
Like painting. The more you paint, the more conversant you get with the colors and the canvas and everything. So it was really, really awesome, Ardra. A very flawless, like you were totally drowned into your photography. A very, very flawless presentation. It was really enjoyable. Along with that, very, very good pointers you have given us. Thank you so much for shelling out that kind of time. Guys, Adra is
Thank you.
actually quite unwell today, but still she made it to this.
My
Thank you
pleasure, ma'am.
so
It's been such a pleasure to be here and talk about something that I love.
And friends, I must tell you all that you must visit www.artodontics.com to see the photographs that are displayed by Dr. Ardra. They are just too amazing. The nature pictures, they are just too good. You all must have a look at it. You can't miss out onto that. They are a visual treat. Yes, Sujit, thank you. Thank you, Ardra. Sujit is thanking you for the basic information.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much, guys. We will be back with some other interesting topic. Until now, actually, I have not decided anything for the next week. Let's see, either next week or the fortnight later. Yes, Dr. Amit, sorry, it's not written out here, but Amit Bhagat is again thanking you for an interesting and informative session. Thank you so much, Ardra. And
Thank you,
even
ma'am.
Medha, Sagna, everyone is appreciating you. And even Madhu, Sachin, he's a student of photography and he's really liking it. That's great.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Ardra. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for watching us. Bye.
Thank you so much for the warm response, and thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for being with us once again. And we'll be back as promised with some another interesting session. Till then, go ahead and see www.artodontics.com. Bye-bye.